done before fall break, that way you don't have to do anything. So that's happening. And praise the Lord for fall break, because when I was an undergrad, that did not exist until my senior year. So y'all are really lucky. There are some more seats down here if you're just coming in. I don't really spit that much when I talk, so that's nice. My name is Stephanie O'Brien. I'm the Director of Academic Resources and the Assistant Director of Stampede. How many of you have already been to a Harding Hack? Perfect. Do I have any students in here who are in the 12 o'clock section of American Government with Lori Klein? Anyone? I'm glad. Okay. See you Monday. I'm their new teacher, so that's cool. Extra credit for you. How many of you are here for extra credit? Almost everyone again. Neat. Okay. Well, hopefully this presentation is a little bit different. In 2 weeks, on the 18th, there's going to be another Harding Hack on like learning styles and just thinking outside the box and learning how to learn. That is something that a lot of students come to college and they don't know, even though they've already gone through 13 years of school. It's hard. It is difficult to sort of realize how to study, so I'm going to touch on that because there's no way I can talk about tests without talking about how you actually learn the information. How many of you are freshmen? Raise your hand. The far majority of you. Okay, so the majority of you may sort of be in a little bit of shock after you've had your first round of tests and you're realizing that college is a little bit harder than what you're used to. Some of you may have received some early alerts. 1 or 2 is fine. If you receive 3, you're going to have to come up to our office. But I don't want that to worry you. So if in today you hear something and you're like, you know what, I need more details on this, because I could talk to you about this stuff for truly hours. So I need you all to just be aware that this is very much of an overview. It's super, super broad, and that's also super okay, because most of you are just here for extra credit. I get it. But I hope you learned something, and I hope you think about something, okay? So, the root of the problem for most students, I'm going to have to take off my shoes, let's be real. The root of the problem for most students when they struggle with tests, or at least testing anxiety, is truly just a sheer amount of stress and not being fully prepared. You are stressed out when that test is passed out, or you download it when you're in the testing lab, a lot of the time because you truly aren't prepared because you procrastinated. I am the queen of procrastination. I get it. If there were a crown, I would definitely be in possession of it. That's not a good thing. Procrastination is sometimes arrogance and sometimes pride, and a lot of times just an unwillingness to do stuff. So if you're wanting to do well on a test, that's one of the first things that has to go. You can't procrastinate. And for some of your classes, you may feel like you can just study the day before. And honestly, sometimes you can in order to do well on a test. However, I do want you all to, as we're going through this, to just bear in mind that you're coming to Harding not just to receive letter grades on a transcript. I'm hoping that especially at least in your major classes, you're truly wanting to learn the information so that after the test day it isn't just gone, that you actually remember something because you're paying bucket loads of money in order to actually learn it. So procrastination is a huge part of what's going to make you stressed. If you do not know how to manage your time, which forces you to procrastinate sometimes, that's also going to make it to where on your test, you're not going to do that well because you didn't make the time to actually do well. And when I work with students and they're failing the test, these 2 things are huge. You also may not know how to study, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today, and also for sure the next Harding Hack. And some of you may truly struggle with anxiety. I am also a licensed therapist, and I meet with students all the time who truly are anxious. Some of them take medication for it, and some of them just sort of live in this state of perpetual heart racing and anxious thoughts, and the fact that they just really think that they're spinning out of control. So they may be anxious about life, and then it becomes even more crippling when they're taking a test. And if that's you, I'm really sorry about that. I would encourage you, because college is a really stressful time, because it's new, you have to meet new people, which can be really stressful for a lot of folks. And you have to think about what you're doing when you're getting out of here, and you have to be an adult. And adulting is hard. So if that is you, seek out help for that, for sure. When it comes to procrastination though, a lot of you procrastinate because you would rather be doing other things. That was definitely me. In undergrad, I had this horrid habit, praise the Lord for curfew, because I would just hang out with my friends and then at curfew start my homework. Don't do that. That's very bad choices. A lot of students procrastinate because they'd rather be doing other things, even if it just means sitting there on their phone, scrolling through Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, or they'd rather watch Netflix, or they'd rather just do anything but academics. It becomes even more hard if you're in a class which requires a lot of your energy. So if you're staying up till 1, 2, 3, or 4 in the morning, and then you get up and you have to either go to like 8 o'clock Bible or to chapel, and then you have classes all day and you hang out with your friends and you don't have time for the afternoon nap, by the time it's the evening or the late afternoon and you have to sit down to do Chem 121, it's not happening because that's hard and it's definitely not enjoyable and it's just too difficult, so you just put it off. And if you're anything like me, or at least the way I used to be, if there's a task that's really difficult and you've put it off and then it's sort of just too late, you just don't go back to it, and then it gets harder and harder to do because it's more and more late. That's hard. Also, even though I really like to learn, and I have 3 degrees, I like to learn something, school can be really boring. And a lot of the classes that you're in don't interest you. You're at a university where it's a liberal arts school. So you're going to have to take classes even if you really hate them. You're going to have to take a math and some histories and some like global literacy classes. And those things may truly be the bane of your existence. So again, it may cause you to procrastinate. That's hard. Also for procrastinating, you might have a true fear of failure or fear of being successful. Or just you're such a perfectionist as opposed to even starting a task. You simply won't do it because you know it will take you hours and hours and hours to write a 1-page summary because you feel like it has to be perfect. So instead you just don't. That's also not the best. And in college, a lot of the time you just have to learn how to get by doing something as opposed to everything. It's always better to do something as opposed to nothing. That's something you need to have ingrained. And then some of these things, you truly just may not know how to do your schoolwork. You may not have the study skills. You may not have the true cognitive ability to comprehend everything immediately as quickly as they're asking you to do it. Or if it's like a math, you truly may not remember enough foundational algebra or enough of the general concepts or problems to get something done in the first place. And so all of this stuff that they assume that you know or know how to know, you sort of feel lost. And I know for several of you who are freshmen, coming into these college level classes, a lot of professors just assume that you know some stuff. And if you're in chemistry especially, that is the case. Or a lot of the math classes, the ones that are a little bit more objective, they're going to assume that you know some things. And if you already are starting out behind, then it's almost overwhelming. So then you just don't do it. And you find yourself at this point in the semester, almost at midterms, calling home and feeling really stressed out and overwhelmed, like, I don't know what I'm doing. And then you try to pour all of your energy into school because you need to save ship. And then you decide not to do a social club, and you decide to sort of just forego all the social aspects, and you drown yourself in school and get overwhelmed. Or you just throw away school and you dive into the social aspect of college, and then you get in a lot of trouble. And I don't want that for any of you. So if these things are things that you can relate to, because you know when it comes to taking tests and doing well, you simply just procrastinate all the time, I want to encourage you with every fiber of my being, there's a lot of fibers here, to come to the Center for Student Success and meet with someone so they can make a plan with you. Meet with one of the academic counselors so they can say, okay, here's the exact problem with you specifically, because you might not be able to relate to all of these. No one's going to be able to relate to all of them. But if any of these things you realize, oh, that might be a problem for me, we want you to come see us, and we want you to come talk to us about that, because that's a big deal. It is important to every once in a while do this, to treat yourself. That's significant. But when you start to feel overwhelmed, and when it comes to deal with your grades, which at the end of the day, does have some future implications for you. It definitely has monetary implications. You don't feel like you can. But just talk to us. You need to find a good life balance. Okay, when it comes to time management, we already had a Harding hack on this topic, and I just went through a lot of different ways that you can save some time or help yourself out with time. How you spend your time is really important. And because I've already talked about this for an hour, you know I could go on and on about it. But if this is something you're continuing to struggle with, you at least need to have a plan. You need to tell your time where you're where it needs to go, in the same way when you one day graduate and you have this awesome college degree, you have a great salary, you're going to have to tell your money where to go. You're going to have to budget it so you know how much money you have allocated for different things. The same is true for time, because those are not endless resources. And you can't win back time. You only have 24 hours a day, no matter who you are, what you do, or what you know. And so you have to know how to spend it. And in college, it's so important that you make time for friends. And at Harding especially, it is so important that you make time for the Lord, in my opinion. And you're in college, so it's also so important that you make time for your academics. So you have to schedule those things. You may not be the kind of person who can live chained to a schedule. I went through all of undergrad and all of my master's degree never keeping a calendar. And that's kind of dumb. I just would write everything on my hand. I don't know how I don't have cancer. Ink poisoning at least, but I would just look like I had tattoos because I would just write everything on myself. Don't do that. I just looked very unprofessional all the time. In fact, I did that earlier today, and I knew I was coming here, so I went to the bathroom to wash it off. That's a real story. Because old habits die hard. And now I just use Siri all the time instead. Trusty, loyal servant to me. But I need y'all to do that. And you may be in some classes, your general ed classes, and you're like, you know what? I have enough time. I'm not struggling there. Just pack this away in the future. Because when you become a junior or a senior, and you have these senior seminars and these projects, you have all these classes and all this club stuff and all this other stuff and all this relationship stuff, and it's a little overwhelming. You're going to wish that you had already developed that skill and that habit. And on the professional side of things, if you are going into any kind of career that deals with other people in any form, they sort of expect people now to keep a schedule and to know how to work a Google Calendar. It's sort of like they expect you to know how to do a Microsoft Word document. It's almost assumed knowledge. And that is something that you don't really learn in a class. They just expected you to acquire that skill when you're in college. So I implore you all to learn how to manage your time. And if you do not think that you have a time management problem, or you think that you don't waste time, then keep track of what you do and how you spend it. Go a week and see how much time you watch TV, or you watch Netflix, or you watch Hulu, or you watch YouTube. Keep track of how much time you're on social media, and keep track of how much time you're actually spending with the Lord, or spending with your boyfriend or girlfriend, or spending with your friends, and spending with school. And then see if there is a congruence between what you would say are your priorities in life and what you would say are your priorities with your time. Because if you would say that your relationships in school are the most important, but they get the least amount of your time, it's kind of a problem. So if you sort of just want to do a little bit of an experiment with yourself, log your hours and see. But when it comes to taking tests, if you don't make time to study every day, and if you do not truly just review your notes every single day as opposed to just cramming, you're not going to do well. And I've said this, I believe, in the first two Harding hacks. The way that we faculty make our syllabi and make our tests and make our assignments is under the assumption that for every hour you're with us in class, you're spending 2 hours outside of class. That's a lot of time. And you may not do that, but you should at least be spending 1 hour per class, for sure. Because we're making it difficult enough where you need to do that. So if that is not a priority of yours, you might need to pivot some of your time. Okay, now, when we talk about planting the seed, this is how you're actually putting in the information into your brain. My sincere hope and prayer is that all of you, when you go to class, you're actually paying some kind of attention It kills me when students go to class and they just pull up their laptop and then they spend that whole hour on the internet, either going through social media or working on other classes. There's just almost no point in that. There really isn't. Don't go if you're going to do that, because you're wasting your time. And just being a warm body, I realize some professors would count that as attendance, but that isn't the goal. So the first step to really planting the seed is actually being present in class and listening. Now for some of you that may be really difficult because you do not learn by hearing things. And I'm so sorry because that's how I'm presenting 99% of my information today. So listening may be really difficult for you. But you have got to figure out how you soak in information, for sure. If you do not know how to learn, it's not just going to hurt you in college, it is truly going to hurt you for the rest of your life. Every day in my job, whether it be as a counselor or as the director and all my work here, or any of the other hats that I wear, I have to learn information daily, like truly learn it. I have to read stuff, I have to watch seminars. To keep my counseling license, I have to have continuing education units, and I'm constantly held accountable to learning. And it isn't just because I'm in a people profession. All of my friends who I went to undergrad with who are out in the career field, like career world, they're constantly having to learn. And so if you don't know how to just retain information and things sort of just go in and out, that's going to be a real problem for you, and not just because of your grades. So my goal, if I could just do anything for Harding students, the real value of a real education is learning how you learn and learning about yourself. I don't care about the content as much, because a lot of time you can look that stuff up. I care making sure you're self-aware enough to know how to go about doing it in the first place, because that's a life skill, not just a college skill. You need to learn effectively to where you're actually remembering stuff, and efficiently so it doesn't take up too much of your time, because again, time is precious. And I would much rather you spend an hour doing something and you get it than 3 hours, because that's a waste of your time. And there are so many things that you can do to shorten your study time if you know yourself. So self-awareness is huge. If you want to know your learning style, there are several assessments for that. There's one that I use in my office, and then there's one that all of my academic counselors use in the center. And it's quick, it's easy, and it will tell you, hey, this is how you learn, at least according to this assessment. And then I'm going to go through the general ones right now. So if you don't know your learning style, I would definitely take notes on all of them. If you feel like, oh, this may be me, I would pay closer attention. And I'm going to go into a lot more details on these in a few weeks. How many of you have know your learning style already? A few of you. How many of you have no idea what I'm talking about? Not many hands there, okay, so that's good. So if you're an auditory learner, when it comes to studying for your test, you are going to want to hear almost everything. Okay, it doesn't do you as well to see it or even to interact with it. You truly have to hear it. So right now, this is great for you because I'm standing up here talking, and traditional lectures do really well for you. An online class or a class that is a hybrid class, you're going to struggle in because your professor is not up there telling you everything. And that's in some ways good for you because Harding doesn't offer many of those. But an auditory learner, if they hear it, they're good. They can remember song lyrics really, really well, and they can do a whole lot. If they study with another person and they hear another point of view, or if they go to the SI sessions, if you guys have those in any of your courses, and you hear your SI leader or your classmates re-explain something, that's really helpful. If you're super timid or super shy, or you don't have friends in your classes and you know you need to hear the information, it is truly okay to explain it out loud and record it on your phone and then play it back to yourself. That's perfectly fine and actually not weird. If you need to go to a place where you can talk out loud, because a lot of people who are auditory do really well when they actually hear themselves, don't study in the library quietly because that isn't going to work for you. And actually all of the sound loud, especially in that glass classroom, don't study in there because those sounds are going to distract you. If you're an auditory learner, you cannot study with like the TV on or other distractions, even if you think you can, because if that's the way you learn information, then you're going to be soaking up all of that stuff as opposed to your content. So you need to be mindful of that and disciplined to that. For some people who are auditory learners, if they play non-lyrical music, so like classical music, for me, I listen to a lot like the Trans-Siberian Orchestra Christmas album, nonstop for every paper I wrote in undergrad, which was a lot of papers. But that's just what you have to do. If there's a concept that you do not understand, especially if you're like in a science class, YouTube it and watch how other people explain it. There's no shame in that at all. And you have so many resources at your fingertips that you're going to have to hear it. Okay? Visual learners have to see things. There are two kinds of visual learners. And I need to make this difference. Some of you are going to be so awesome at remembering like pictures and faces and colors and graphs. But then when it comes to actually reading a textbook and remembering like words and language, you are the worst. And then others of you, you can remember everything that you've read and you can remember where things were in the textbook. But when it comes to actually placing, oh yeah, that person was wearing this or doing this, or this is what that picture looked like, or these were the colors here, you're not very good. And you're not very good at visualizing numbers. Okay, numbers and pictures often go together for people, and then there's language and like words and stuff that's in written form. Those are two types of visual learners. And it's important to distinguish between those two. If you are a visual person who is visual numerical, so if you took this assessment, we would tell you. That kind of learner is really going to benefit from the colorful things. So using colors, including for guys, this may seem really girly, but it's actually really helpful. If you are writing your notes in class and you write 2 or 3, like 3 or 4 lines in one color, and then you skip a line and start it with another color, when you're going back to study, it's going to help you break up your notes when you're taking your notes, and it's going to help you say, oh yeah, that was written in green and it was here on the page and this is what it said. And that's just a helpful little tip for people. Other students do really well if they take all of their notes for one class in one color and all of their notes for another class in another color, and they just start associating that color with that class. And then when they go in to take their test, although you can't typically take a test in a pen, they'll just have their pen with them and it helps them jog their memory because they've made those associations and they can see it. That's helpful. If you do not know, if you're a history person, you're in a history class. I was history and political science in undergrad, and a lot of those people will just get up there and lecture, and they don't use many pictures or visuals. I would get online and Google image these people, so you can actually see who they're talking about, and you can put a face with a name, and it will help you recall them. It's okay to do that. The internet in so many ways will be your best friend if you're a visual person. Flashcards, I don't like the traditional flashcards of the front and back because most people, if they have flashcards, they're going to have like the word and then the definition on the back, and they'll read it and they'll be like, oh yeah, and put it to the back, and they won't really remember at all what they've learned. And so I prefer to do a matching method with my note cards. So for example, I should have brought note cards with me, but if I were, does anyone in here want to be a pharmacist one day? A few of you, neat, okay. So I do this with pharmacy students a lot. You're going to have to know a couple of things, and by a couple I mean a heck of a lot. So you're going to have to know the brand name of drugs. You're going to have to know the generic name. You're going to have to know the structure. You're going to have to know the mechanism of action. You're going to have to know the counter drugs that you can't take with it. And you're going to have to know all of these different categories. Okay, and the same is true of a lot of classes. For American government, You're going to have to know the different branches of government. In a lot of your classes, you can split them up into categories. Okay? So on a note card, I would make all of the brand names white note cards. And then I would make all of the generic names on yellow note cards. And all of the structures on green note cards. And the mechanisms of action on blue, and these are on orange. Okay, so for every category, you're going to have a different color note card. And so then I would have metformin, glyburide, and then I write the structure, its mechanisms of action, and its counterintuities. And then on the back of the note card, I would write number 1. So everything that had to do with metformin would have a 1 on the back. And then I would pick another drug, and its brand name would always go on white, and its generic name would always go on yellow, and everything that had to do with that card on every color would have a 2 on the back. And then you just mix them all up and match them, and you can check yourself. And you don't cheat that way. And I'm hoping you can maybe visualize what I'm talking about. If not, I'm so sorry. But if you have tons of different items, you match them all, because everyone has a category. You match them all by the number on their back. That way you can't just cheat. And it becomes a really big matching game. And it's helpful. And those are cards that you can keep. So you may not want to do this with an undergrad class that is just a general studies class you don't care much about, because it can be time consuming. But if it's a class where you know you're going to have to know that information forever, this is an awesome visual way to do it. And it's super helpful. And it's something that you can make the cards while just sitting with your friends and talking, and then actually study them on your own. And it will help you see what you're doing. And that's significant. Kinesthetic learners, they have to be up and moving around. How many of you guys sit in class and you just get so bored, or your legs go like this and you're just like struggle busting? That, especially for guys, and more now that people have played video games growing up, we're seeing more and more kinesthetic learners who have a really hard time sitting in class for 15 minutes or an hour and 15 minutes and paying attention, because your brain is just gone. And you sit there, and then before you know it, you have no idea what the professor just said. You're way behind in the notes, and you can't concentrate. A lot of that is going to be a kinesthetic learner, because you need to be doing something. So in order to keep your attention in class, you do need to be writing notes. For a lot of my students, when it comes to taking tests or sitting in class, I have them do something like quietly with their hands. So they can either sit there in their chair and just press their thumbs down to sort of get rid of some of that energy. It's just grounding. You ground yourself, and you just press down as hard as you can. And 1, it will help alleviate some of your stress because you're tensing your muscles. And 2, it's getting rid of some of that kinetic energy that you just have all over the place that is sidetracking you. I also have a lot of students get silly putty because it's quiet, as long as it's not going to distract you and you're just sitting there playing with it, which a lot of you would do. But if you just play with it in your hand, that way all that excess energy is in one hand and you can take notes in the other. Or you can take your tests with the other hand. And that helps a lot of people out. Kinesthetic learners need to not ever just sit there and study. It is not going to be helpful to you. And so if you can go somewhere where you can stand up and either walk around and review your note cards or read your textbook or talk out loud, just the active movement is going to help you. If you can go and shoot hoops and sort of talk about the things that you're studying with a friend, that will help you. If you upstairs in the library, they have those stationary bikes with like the desk thing on top, and they look really strange because they are. But that, if you're a kinesthetic person, the ability to ride a stationary bike and sit there and write and do your homework is phenomenally helpful. And a lot of people don't use those, even though you really, really should. If you are a kinesthetic person, you make associations with things. You're the kind of person who's going to be able to smell something and it's going to jog your memory, or you're going to hear something, hear a song, and it like makes you feel something a little bit more, because you make associations with things, with smells, with sights, with places, with feelings. You have more of an autobiographical memory. And you can use that to your advantage. So for me, I think I might have already told some of you this, but just little things like color associations or clothing associations. If you have really big tests that you're worried about, if you're a kinesthetic learner, You really can wear the same shirt or the same piece of clothing as you studied that you're going to wear when you take that test, because it will physically remind you of what you studied. For pharmacy students, I really have them chew a different flavored gum for every class. So they'll chew peppermint for their pharmacology class, and they'll chew wintergreen for another class, and watermelon for another class. And when they take the test, simply that taste, they're like, oh yeah, this is what I studied. Because they're so heavily kinesthetic that they're going to make all of these connections. And it may sound really crazy, but it also is really effective for a lot of people. But if you are the kind of person who has to use your hands and you have to actually see it work and do it yourself, you cannot just sit there and study for your test, or you're not going to do well. A good way to know if you're this way, if I were to giving directions to a place, if I were to tell you all how to get to my house in Columbia, Missouri, if you feel like you would have to actually look at the map to see where we're going, you're probably far more of a visual person. If I could tell you and say, okay, you're going to do this, you're going to go up this highway, you're going to turn here, and me just dictating it to you is good for you and you'd have a true understanding, you're going to be an auditory person. If you're going to have to be physically in the car with me, driving for 6 hours, and you have to see everywhere we go and you have to experience it yourself, you're probably more of a kinesthetic person. And you may be a mixture of those things. But that's a good way for you to know and something for you to be aware of. And if you're the kinesthetic person who has to actually experience it, a lot of these things you're not going to experience. When you're studying history, you're not going to experience the Holocaust. Praise the Lord. But in some of your classes, if you have classmates, you can even have them act out things if you need help doing that. I've known a lot of students who've actually made their own study groups, and they act stuff out. It sounds kind of crazy, but it's also really helpful. So just think outside the box and do stuff like that, especially if you know it's going to be beneficial to you. Written expressive, these kind of learners, now we're getting to some of the more specific types. A written expressive person simply remembers everything that they write. So in terms of preparing for your test, if you know you need to write everything out in order to remember it, you need to continue to write things out. Some of your professors think they're doing you a service by making their notes available to you, and for a lot of you, that is the biggest blessing. You love those teachers who give you their notes. But if you are a written, expressive person, and you truly have to write it out in order to learn it, you don't need to take their notes, at least in class. You can accept them and be like, thanks for the notes, and you should print them off. But while you're sitting in class, even if they're available to you, you need to be writing it out. And a lot of students don't do that, but it isn't going to be helpful to you if they're given to you, because you have to go through the motions of writing. And if you're a written, expressive person, you need to own a whiteboard of your own. It doesn't have to be a super big one, but any kind of whiteboard where you can just sit and write things and erase things over and over again until you have it down, you need to be doing that. Because that's, every time you write it, you're sort of tattooing it into your brain and into your memory. And when it comes to taking your test, you have got to have a scratch piece of paper or write on the back of your test. And if you're in the computer lab, get a scratch piece of paper. And if you get to a question and you're really not sure what to do about it, just start writing out what you know, and it will jog your memory, because that's how you study. Okay? So if you are written expressive, and you know that you remember almost everything you've ever written, write as much as you can. Write your own study guide. And you have to know that for most people, typing things out, if you're written expressive, isn't nearly as effective. So if you have a Google Doc and you're sharing it with your classmates and they're just putting in all their notes, it may be smarter for you to handwrite a lot of that stuff, because there is the kinesthetic component to being written expressive, and you need to do it your own handwriting, and you need to see it, and that's how you do it. For me, when things are heavily emotional or very personal to me, I have to handwrite that. So I write cards to people, and that's how I can best communicate. but that's only personal stuff. So for some of these things, it might just be a part of you or a certain aspect of your life. If you are oral expressive, it's exactly what it sounds like. It simply means you have to talk it out. And again, this is hard if you're a really shy person because you don't have anyone to talk it out to. But for a lot of you, you have already experienced this sometime in your life where you know information if you can teach it to someone else. You want to say and speak everything you've learned. So the whole idea that you just sit quietly and review your notes will not ever work for you because you have to say it and you have to explain it. And it's okay to have to do that. It's just that if you're in the dorm room and it's 12 o'clock at night and you're studying for an economics test, that's going to be difficult. Your roommate's going to hate you if you're talking about Keynesian theory and that late at night. So you can't do that. You're going to have to be far more intentional and manage your time wisely so you can actually speak out loud. And if you're sitting in the library upstairs, you cannot talk out loud all of your notes because it's disrespectful to everyone around you. So a lot of these things, when you figure out how to study, it's also going to mean you have to sort of change what your plan has been. And sometimes it means you're going to have to find other people to study with. And sometimes it's also going to mean that you don't really need to be studying with other people. In the Center for Student Success, we do have a few classrooms on the back wall with computers and whiteboards. You can close the door and you can come up there and just talk out loud to yourself and write on the whiteboard and talk and explain things. And that's okay to do that. But if this is how you learn the best, you have got to do that and figure out a way and a place where you can do it. You need to verbalize and read out loud, read your textbooks out loud, even if it takes you a little bit longer. It's better to do that. Okay, so when it comes to your actual test, testing anxiety in and of itself is a problem that so many of our students struggle with, especially with their college level tests. And a lot of students don't get the study guides and stuff that you were used to in high school. Or if you're homeschooled, you just don't know how to do it in a high pressure kind of situation. And so you're going to experience these things. They may pass out the test and you mentally just go blank. And everything that you thought you knew is just gone and you can't recall it. And that's awful. You also may have your brain just start racing and you're thinking of 10,000 things and you're starting to get anxious. You can sometimes feel that tightness in your chest or your heart racing or that clammy feeling or just that overwhelming pressure on you that you don't know what's going to happen. And you cannot concentrate on what you're reading and your eyes will move but you're not able to actually soak in what you're actually reading or you're doing. Or your mind may just jump to things in the past when you didn't do as well as you needed to or you thought you should, and that's all you can focus on, and you cannot recall anything that you've learned. Or you just have crippling fear of failure, or you're looking around the class and you're seeing all these other people answering things correctly, and you yourself haven't even gotten past number 2. If this is you, if you're even 3 or 4 of these things, and it's on every single test, this is something that's going to require a whole lot more than just me talking at a seminar to work through and to fix. And this is something that can haunt you and make it to where you don't ever want to take tests and you never want to study, and it can be really defeating. And that's awful. It just sucks a lot. And so if you have this level of testing anxiety and it happens consistently, and it's not just for certain classes or for certain tests, I really encourage you to go and talk to one of us in the Center for Student Success. Because if that's the case, then it doesn't matter how well you've studied beforehand. It doesn't matter that you've learned to not procrastinate. It doesn't matter that you know how to manage your time perfectly. And it doesn't matter if you even know the information. If everything that you've prepared for is just going to be cut off and amputated out of your mind when you sit down for a test. It's a whole different problem. And it's a problem that is a really personal one, and one that cannot just be clear-codedly expressed in a seminar with 150 people, because it is specific to you. And so I want you all to learn how to manage your time. so much better on your exams. But if you truly have testing anxiety, the best thing you could ever do is nip that in the bud and learn how to do it, so come talk to one of us. And right before the test, this does help a little bit with testing anxiety. And just in general, what you need to do. You always need to stay hydrated, but especially before a test, and I've said this before, but your body was created fearfully and wonderfully made to need water. And your brain, which you're going on a test, you're going to be asking a lot of your brain. You're going to be putting it under a lot of pressure. And if you're not giving it what it needs, it's not going to perform for you. So it needs water, and it needs true rest, and it needs nutrients. And the more you can have a routine, the more your body and your brain and like everything in you doesn't have to worry about something, changing. And the less anxious you have to be, because you know that you're going to get up after sleeping enough before a test. You will do better on a test if you get 6 to 8 hours of sleep than if you stayed up all night cramming the information. Truly, studies have been done on this. Students who study all night and cram and only get 1 to 2 or 3 hours of sleep, when they wake up in the morning, the last several hours of what they studied, it doesn't even exist in their brain. Because it's truly when you are asleep, that little secretary that I've talked about before in your brain files away all of that information. So if you're not giving your brain long enough to actually assimilate everything that you've put in it all day, then when you wake up again, everything that didn't have time to get stored away, it's just gone for the most part. It's not going to exist. And that's a true physiological, neurological thing. And so you have to sleep. You may be able to pull it off if you don't for a little while, but that isn't sustainable. And remember that you're trying to learn how to learn, not just learn how to get a B or an A or a C on the test. Okay, if you can visualize success, a lot of students, when they think about tests, they simply think, well, I'm going to fail this. And that's some pretty stinking thinking. If you don't think positively about it, it's not going to go very well. I have learned from being the counselor for the residents at the hospital, as well as watching probably hardly an inappropriate amount of Grey's Anatomy, that if you are sick, if you're sick, and you don't think that you're going to do very well in surgery or with treatment, then you're really not. It becomes sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. My mom has had cancer 3 times, and 3 of my sisters have had cancer. And that's the worst. And they're all doing great now. But if you get to the place anytime, whether it be medically or when it comes to tests or just anything in life, and you feel like you're doomed, chances are you might become doomed. But if you truly stay positive, there's a biology to positive thinking. There's biology to belief. Bruce Lipton, he's a doctor, he wrote a whole book about this. But if you think that you're going to pass the test, you think positively about it consistently, it sort of just becomes a way of life of like, you know what, I may not get 100, but I'm going to do well. And you imagine what it feels like walking out of the class and you've done well and you feel relieved. The chances of you actually feeling that way are a whole lot more. My best friend in high school, she was a phenomenal swimmer. She was actually on the Olympic trial, she was incredible. She was a team captain at the U of A for her whole college career. And she would go through, and it's sort of like hypnosis in some ways, but she would just anchor her successes in her mind. And you can do that with athletes. You can do that with people who have to deliver speeches. You can do it with tests. And again, this is something that's a very individual thing. So if that's something that you feel like you need to reframe and retrain your mind into doing, is learning how to anchor those positive thoughts, come by and see us. But you need to pay attention to what you're thinking about tests, and what you're thinking about school, and what you're thinking about yourself and about learning, because it's going to make a difference. And you also have to learn how to breathe. If you catch your breath or stop breathing during a test, your brain isn't getting the oxygen that it needs. I have proctored countless exams, and I have watched my own students sit there and take tests, and then they just stop breathing, and they hold their breath and they don't even realize it. And there's no way you're going to be able to think clearly if your brain doesn't have oxygen. So if that is you, and that might only be 1 or 2 of you, but if it is you, you're going to have to learn to regulate that. And breathe in and breathe out. And there are so many really incredible like YouTube videos and different things that exist online that can teach you how to breathe. And if you do that every day just to get you into a relaxed state, you're going to do better on your test. In fact, if you put yourself through 2 or 3 minutes of just deep, calm breathing, and you listen to something, and then you breathe in when they tell you to breathe in and hold your breath, and you breathe out when they tell you to breathe out while you're studying, and then do it right before your test, you're going to be in the same state, which means that your brain is going to be in the same place, so you're going to do better on your tests. For all of my residents who are about to take their USMLE or their COMLEX exams, their boards, we do that. For all of my PT and pharmacy students and PA and speech path, we do that. And these are people who are graduate level professional people. And if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for you. So practice it. Get in the habit of doing it. It will truly help you. And if you get anxious, it is very helpful to just tense up your muscles, every muscle in your body, and let it go. Because if you get anxious and your heart's racing and your mind is racing, you have all of this energy and you don't know what to do with it, and it's going to derail you on a test. So if you find that you're taking a test and you freak out because you know that you're underprepared and you haven't done everything that we said to do in the first part of the seminar, you're going to just bomb it if you either stop taking it or you go through in circle C or you just can't even read the questions. So it's okay during a test to just stop and take some deep breaths and tense up your muscles and let them go and focus elsewhere for a second. Because hopefully somewhere in your brain at one point you've heard the information that you're being tested over. So you just have to stop and calm yourself down and then go on a little hike in your brain and think, okay, when did I hear this and when did I learn it? When it comes to multiple choice and true false questions, the chances are you will always be able to narrow it down to at least 2 answers. Well, true false, it's already narrowed down to 2. But for multiple choice, there's always 2 plausible answers almost every time for those who write good tests. So then it's a 50-50 chance. And if you panic and you're like, I don't know, and you just randomly guess, don't do that. Like, read into the test, take your time. It isn't a race. Don't be worried if other people finish before you. That's truly okay. If you know that there's stuff that you're going to forget really quickly that you have to list out right when you get your test, even if it's not on that part on the first page, list all those things out if you're afraid it's going to leave your brain. If you are taking a test that has fill in the blank and you don't know the fill in the blank, go ahead and do the multiple choice and the true false first, because there's probably some hints in there that are going to help you go back and do it. Never leave anything blank, because there's no shot for partial credit if you leave something blank, ever. And it breaks my heart when students just leave something because we can't even give you anything, and that stinks. If you have a part that you know is going to take you a really long time, like an essay, do it. If you know there's a part of the test that counts for a whole lot more points than other parts, and you always run out of time, do that. Be a smart test taker. Okay, you can do it. It becomes a whole lot easier. And when it comes to matching, narrow things down. If this stuff is really difficult for you to wrap your mind around, or you know you need more help, please, please, please come up to the center and ask to meet with a GA, one of our graduate assistants or interns or academic counselors, schedule an appointment. Because this was like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound today. Super brief. Super, super brief. Just come in if you need to. For those of you who are here for extra credit, Jazz and I are going to pass out certificates up by the doors. So you can come in.